my name's Samantha. I'll introduce myself a little bit and then I'll hand over to Leo. We're going to close the session on how to create change, which is something that was gifted to us in the agenda to reflect on how we might create change as we close out on a really amazing weekend. I grew up in Hastings in Hawke's Bay. I grew up just literally on the main street of Hastings in a very basic house with my brother and parents, both of which worked pretty long hours, and so had this real strong sense of both coming from big families of community. And so my weekends were really spent at home whilst my parents renovated and did projects. They were really obsessed with projects growing up. Mine was spent with the kids that were across the road or down the road, entertaining ourselves. And my strongest memories of growing up are the food that we shared at lunch on Sundays, which was whatever mum put together quickly for us. But having a space that was so open to others was a really big part of my life, and having a space that everyone felt comfortable to come was also a really big part of my life. And when I reflect on who I am now as a person, having that sense of community has really shaped it, and it's also given me a huge amount of headspace. My grandmother was a really keen gardener. She really believes in the importance of the diversity of plants. She moved to a subdivision just recently, refusing to go into retirement home, and she took thousands of plants with her, which she potted over a course of a year and then replanted. And her garden is very obvious because it is just so colourful compared to what you know a traditional subdivision to look like, which is mostly hedges. And so that also shaped me, and it gave me a real appreciation for plants. So I studied environmental management, I studied botany. No one mentioned horticulture to me, even though I loved biology at school. And so I became increasingly passionate about how I might bring those things together. And then that kind of led me into, I guess, starting my working life in sustainability and to kind of work through the challenging facts that I was presented with at university about the climate crisis, about the water crisis, about the impeding oil crisis. I really leant into nature and hiking and cold water, and I think that's something that many of you share. I'll hand over to Leo.
Hi everybody, I'm Leo Murray. Thank you, Samantha. We are here introducing ourselves. I come from Mount Maunganui. The mountain Mowau is the mountain that I draw my strength from when I think of home. My Tūranga Waiwai there, the isthmus, the Kaituna River is sort of where I played and where all the water molecules of my body got made. And yeah, I've sort of here on this journey of making change and really from a place of love for nature, not out of fear of what we stand to lose when it can't support us. So really just bringing myself into this space as someone who really gives a shit and is here to share what I've learned. Yeah. And the session is about how to create change. How do you make change, Samantha? And what how has that been expressed in your work?
Really important question to reflect on, and I had to do a little bit of that this weekend. And I was really lucky that when I left university, I got offered a role as a sustainability manager at a large produce company called TNG Global, who are part of the system that we have been discussing in great detail. I was really young. I had no experience in corporate anything, but I had a huge passion for improving that system. And so how I made change was by listening and by reading. And so what allowed me to enact projects was listening to other people who had tried to come up against that same system before, and also by talking to a diverse group of people about that. And so that led me into projects like changing the plastic packaging that the tomato business had used for their whole life basically into cardboard. And so the tomato packaging that you might have seen that went into cardboard, and maybe you might go back now, that was a project that I worked on in my first year at TNG, and I really had to listen to others into how to intervene in that system and convince people to do that. But also, as soon as it went into the system, there were tons of problems. It didn't hold, it wasn't as strong as the plastic, people didn't like it, apparently it wasn't making enough money, And so I had to kind of keep reminding people that this is a prototype and we need to learn from this and keep evolving, and it was never going to be perfect. And so I think that's reflective of how I make change. And then also holding true to the fact that nothing's perfect, and that you can only do the best with what you have, and that often it's really important just to be brave. And so there were lots of things I could have done in that role. One of the things that I did do was work on an anaerobic digestion plant, which took food waste to create a renewable energy source for those glass houses. It was the best option that was possible to get them out of natural gas. It's definitely not perfect, but it does mean that that glass house is no longer using a fossil fuel. What's the next step of that? Thinking a lot more critically about how you redesign that whole glass house? Definitely. But the bravery that took to say that we need at least a step on a radical change transition.
That was a huge project.
Took 7 years. And I think that's the scale of what we're talking about. It takes so much time. It's really what I've heard today was just how long these things take, and you don't see any progress for so long. I worked in really close partnership with the guy who's very much an entrepreneur. He owns a small business in stock feed, taking food waste, turn it into stock feed. We came up against so many hurdles. No one had ever put it into a glass house. There were so many regulations why that didn't work. There were so many rules. But we just kind of stayed true to the fact that this is the best that we have. And the relationship is what allowed that to happen. We worked for 5 years without a commercial agreement, which is pretty rare in a large corporate working with someone else. But we really worked on intentionality and trust, and it got us there in the end. How do you make change, Leo? What are some of your projects?
Yep. I graduated from university in the middle of a global financial crisis, so I became a DJ, and I spent the next 10 years kind of partying professionally. What was great about that is it really just freed up my time to journey school myself and learn the solutions, and I got really stoked on permaculture as a toolbox. My degree was in media, international relations, and New Zealand politics. And so I learned all about the problems of the world and none of the solutions. And I had the student loan that was like, yo, problems. And I was really interested in finding out the solutions. And so, yeah, I got really deep into permaculture and I started winding up teaching permaculture. And then I came back to Aotearoa and was doing permaculture design for people's properties, and they would sort of like stick my nice shiny designs on their wall and they'd pat themselves on the back, and like nothing was really happening all that fast. Like implementation wasn't really happening on the same timelines of urgency that I was sort of needing my actions to be in line with. And so I started applying design ethics and principles to like business and events. And so I sort of wound up started calling myself a sustainability consultant, sort of fake it till you make it, you know. And then it turns out that was kind of working, but most of the invoices that were getting paid were to do with waste. And so I wound up creating a company called Y Waste, and we were collecting compost from cafes and events and businesses and composting it. And I got really hooked on building soil. That was kind of like, you know, there was like, you know, peak soil and peak oil and peak everything, and I just thought like that's one thing that can help me sleep at night, is just knowing that I'm sort of helping create this ecstatic skin of our Mother Earth. And so like that was sort of something I kept rolling with. And then I wound up studying leadership for change. I think at that point it was called the Sustainable Practitioner, and that was with the Otago Polytechnic, and I was kind of the guinea pig around sort of bringing in a regenerative lens into that program. And now it's rolling. It's called Leadership for Change. Yeah, Fiona was on that course. It was awesome, and that sort of gave us a whole bunch of frameworks to then analyze our actions on this kind of through this trajectory of ecological healing. And it became clear quite quickly that sustainability is really just this knife edge between degeneration and regeneration, and driving around burning diesel to collect compost to enable people to just keep business as usual rolling was no longer really acceptable for me. So sort of came up with a new offering that was beyond sustainability. And so now we offer worm farms on the circular economy. So we have hundreds of worm farms throughout New Zealand that are on subscription, and that has sort of been rolling. And I'm really like stoked that like past Leo hooked up future Leo, and now a whole bunch of other people with an actually regenerative income, which is really hard to come by these days. And so kind of that's a whole thing. And I'll just park that for now because it's a whole big thing. And but what really interested me was just how people can all agree that waste kind of sucks, and it doesn't really matter where you are in a socioeconomic range or on a political spectrum. Everyone can get behind it. It's not such a polarizing topic. There's plenty of those around, and everyone can kind of just get on board with waste minimization. And so I was using waste as a platform or a vehicle to communicate big picture ideas. And so that was kind of where I suppose I started to take on this changemaker identity as a storyteller, as someone that was contributing to our shared cultural narratives, which really are what form our reality. You know, we have like objective reality, and then we have our subjective reality, and it's our intersubjective reality that we consider like the real world. And so if I was to kind of try and reverse engineer that process, I got really hooked into sort of mythology and storytelling as an effective way to create change. And so that really like started to come in in ways that were expressed through sort social media, and then like events. I also work as a musician, so there's a whole like culture of people who go to these festivals, and they become quite open to new ideas after being in this kind of temporary autonomous zone where everything's kind of different. And so that was a really great place to bring in new ways of seeing the world. And I also sort of wound up at that point training with the sort of grandmothers that created a sort of a lineage within deep ecology called the work that reconnects. And that was really great because I'd sort of almost created this whole new language to communicate a more, a new story or a new and ancient story. And this was heavily influenced by Charles Eisenstein and a bunch of other people. But I really just wanted to sing by the same songbook, or like pedal the waka of a kaupapa or an ideology, a philosophy that was already moving. I didn't want it to be mine. I didn't want to own it. I didn't want to carry it. I just wanted to nourish and just get on board with it. And so that sort of wound up with this kind of, like a bit of an audience that was willing to listen when I spoke, which is something that you kind of struggle for when you come out of university and everyone's got big ideas. And we sort of wound up working with different events with a general theme for transformation and creating change. I suppose a notable one of that is New Frontiers, which was a large kind of conference style event where we were welcoming people into Aotearoa on a new kind of visa that was created with part of that team. And that was called the Global Impact Visa, and people would apply to become the fellows to the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. And then they were able to enter into New Zealand on a visa based on their qualitative impact, not their quantitative value. And that was really powerful kaupapa, and that's still kind of moving, but COVID was hard on it, and so was the Labour government, who are a little bit hostile to sort of like public partnerships. And so really, really kind of connected with the kind of transformational community here in Aotearoa, pollinate a lot of these communities with ideas and each other. And I suppose that's how I've wound up working with the Future Whenua team, and amazing work here being done. And so I suppose to wrap up, like how I suppose I create change, I'll draw on some of my training from civil disobedience and non-violent direct action. I was also fairly active in setting up Extinction Rebellion here in Aotearoa, and I've sort of put my life on the line for a whole bunch of things that I really care about, and those actions necessitate a high degree of design. And so the theory of change is really that you create an action which has a series of outcomes, and then you have perception, and then once you've plugged in the whole way that those outcomes and that action have been perceived by all of its audience, only then can you gauge its impact. And so how I create change is I need to essentially identify the impact that I want to create, and then I want to see how, and then I need to reverse engineer that all the way through people's hearts and minds, right through to all of the variables that might come out of creating an event like this, or creating an action, and then making sure that action can somehow lead through that theory of change to the desired outcome. So it's sort of, there's a lot of design work when it comes to creating change, and we all certainly know that this business as usual and the systems that we're familiar with are resistant to change. So I'm really quite sensitive to people just running in and trying to make things different without really thinking them through. And so it's really awesome that we're here kind of chatting about it, teasing out how to do this. I'm sure you've all got amazing ideas, and we'll definitely gather those in a second. What we thought we might do is just sort of go inside for a bit, and I just want to ask you guys a question just internally. Normally I'd split you up into groups, but the question is really, what if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do in service to the earth? So just take a moment. Just, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do in service to the earth? And then in pursuing this vision, what particular action or project would you feel called to undertake? A few people taking notes, I love that. Now, I'd love you to just bring your attention to kind of harvest internally what resources inside and outside you already have that will help you achieve this project. These can be talents or strengths of character, knowledge or skills you've acquired. They can be relationships, contacts, networks you can draw on, location, employment, resources, finance. And so now we want to move forward with this corridor, with something in mind, with something that you feel like you could do, like you could take away from future whenua. Because there's been so much shared here and so much wealth of knowledge. And what we'd love to do as an outcome is to really draw attention, not just necessarily to the change that we can create as individuals, but as we can create as part of a network, as part of a team.
When I close my eyes, I just think how much what I see is just diversity and diversity in our landscapes. And I just feel so drawn to trees. I don't know what it is about trees, but for me personally, I just feel so drawn to them. When I was 3 years old, I watched some cartoon TV show, I don't know what it was, but they sung this song, and this woman said, trees, they make air, please, it's not fair. And she was talking about the deforestation. And it's just that, I don't even know what that TV show is called, but that rings in my head all the time. And so kind of my journey into the connection was at that point 2 years ago when I was at TNG. I moved back to Hawke's Bay, my home, covered in apple orchards, a huge part of that landscape. And I came to a point of I no longer had options to take the easy kind of quick wins in sustainability. The light bulb moment had ended. It wasn't just about replacing light bulbs, it was how do we create change on those landscapes. And I really just became aware of the fact that so much of these solutions needed to come from how we grow, but I actually didn't have the resources or skills to progress that. I wasn't the best person for that. And so I moved into an organization that taught me about design thinking, taught me about the circular economy, taught me about systems, so I could start to learn about how do you get to the heart of a problem. And from that, I really learned the importance of discovery. I really lean into the discovery phase of any work that I do, that listening, that understanding, that trying to see what's happening across an entire, who are the different people who are involved, what are their needs, what are they trying to achieve, and what are the barriers that are getting into their way. And that taught me a new approach to systems change, which is thinking about what are the different policies or information flows or mindsets or connections or relationships that are currently holding that problem in place, and then how could you work with people to start to shift those, to remove those, to create space for that change. And what I've lent into now is thinking about how do I enable that tipping. That was 2 years ago. I came to Future Whenua. I was at Circularity. I was really starting to learn a lot more about what does a more diverse, distributive and regenerative food system look like, as someone who was really in that kind of commercial world trying to figure out how to fix it. That was quite a different direction. Zeb asked me to speak. I came just because I felt in my heart that it was a good opportunity, that I'd meet people that might give me something new, that I might be able to share something, that I might meet some new people. I didn't really know what to expect. But here I go, it was. And I met Leo, and I met a number of people who have been really important in my life, and it's not an underestimation to say that my life changed from Future Whenua in a number of ways. The people that shared gave me new perspectives. I met Finn, who introduced me to Future Farmers, and I met Leo, who I didn't actually really talk to at Future Whenua, but connected with afterwards when I moved to Wellington. And since then, Leo has taught me a lot. As someone who's really passionate about sustainability, as someone who really likes to argue with CEOs and likes to be in a boardroom and really just likes to think about a big system, Leo has taught me the importance of going inward and reflecting on what it means to look after yourself in that process. Leo's also really taught me the importance of giving space for people to feel. I think particularly in our corporate structures, it's really easy to get really focused on results and to think about what's the fastest solution. And through my conversations in Kōrero with Leo, I've really lent into the need to enable people to feel what is happening, to observe what is happening around them, and then create space for them to turn that and connect that into then how they might want to take action based on what they're feeling inside. And then also to just take opportunities. I got offered a role at Zespri as their head of sustainability, which I didn't really think I would get or would be what I wanted. But Leo asked me what I could achieve if that exact question that you just went through, if I had no barriers, what could I achieve in that role? And so I have that in my mind now. And so that's the bravery that I will need to take into it, which is how could I achieve the things that need to be done and push up against that system.
So we're kind of teasing out this whole piece where if you're really into creating change, you can achieve so much more as part of a team or as part of an organization. If there's any change that's lasting and meaningful, one person isn't going to do it by themselves. Samantha's potential for positive impact as head of CEO for Zespri, which is like multi-billion-dollar industry, like maybe even, it's a crazy big behemoth, and it's the horticultural context of where I grew up, and so I was never going to be able to influence that industry, but working together, Samantha's in that role, and we can kind of work as a team behind the scenes, and there's an exchange. And that, to me, is something that I think I really want to draw attention to if we're talking about creating change. A great example is these guys, Future Whenua team, like Rob, Future, Zev from the Whenua, and there's like a left brain, right brain synergy happening. And that is something that I'm sure we could all appreciate, is just if we had someone who kind of like connected in, and we could sort of collaborate and be much more generative with our energy, so that we're not just always trying to push and fight, because it's the systemic issues are just so great that trying to suss them by ourselves is just ridiculous. So it's almost like we're just trying to like almost like take a load off here and think about how being in partnership can actually increase your ability to create positive change. Like, since meeting Samantha a year ago at Future Whenua, I've had much more focus on my business. I suppose there's like a discipline piece that's rubbed off. Very grateful for that. Like, there's a big refocus on why waste. I think there's like that team is maybe 9 or 10 people. It's important that I stay on point for that. And acknowledging Fiona over here, our worm technician in Otipoti, Dunedin. And also about to buy some land up north, and Samantha's sort of strategic mind has also been really valuable in sort of forming, like, what are we going to do there, and she's going to be part of that vision moving forward. And so really, like, there's kind of almost like been a calming for me also around like not trying to convince others what to do or how to be. It's really about just kind of leading by example. And I suppose I've kind of really been grinding away at mitigation, trying to slow down this world eating machine for so long now, that it's a big focus for me is in adaptation, and just trying to like get on with creating this more beautiful world that our heart knows is possible. And other people will absolutely find that inspiring if that's life affirming, and that's what nature wants, or if that's what the universe wants. We there's only a certain amount of kind of like behavior change that you can influence without just living that truth as well. And so my sort of direction from here is a little bit less kind of like trying to shake the world and getting it to change. It's more about sort of just tending my own garden and finding a place in the world that I love and caring for it. And so I suppose we're just really here to just open up the possibility that each person here may play a pivotal role in each other's future. You know, like, just that person that was sitting next to you just then, with their eyes closed, imagining what they could achieve if the possibilities were endless, and then the project that they identified and the resources that they collected for themselves, they might be the left brain to your right, or the right brain to your left. They might be the future to your whenua. And so this kind of, it sort of flies in the face of a lot of status quo thinking. You know, the culture of the individual is so strong in our civilizational narrative, that the competitive advantage it's like a reflex that we have. But there's so much evidence to suggest that in nature, everything is cooperating, and there's a collaborative advantage. You know, I personally don't feel like Darwin and Descartes really cracked it when they asserted that all of nature was like survival of the fittest and like tooth and nail. There's so much cooperation and collaboration happening in the ecological realm. And so it's kind of this what we'd love to do now is to hand it back to you with another question. And the question is to sort of like harvest from the weekend and apply it to your current work, and also that piece that you identified in that short visualization, which is, what have you heard this weekend at Future Whenua from the sessions that have been on offer, and how has that changed your perspective, or how has it altered your approach to what you're doing or would like to do? So take a moment, because we're going to share back and harvest those reflections. So we'll just chill over here and talk amongst ourselves, and you guys can take a couple of minutes. What have you heard this weekend that has added or changed your perspective? Added to or changed your perspective? Yeah, your talk was a real highlight for me, Amy. Thank you. The way you spoke your poem was almost like like induced a trance-like state. It was like hypnotic, and the messages were like a grandmother wisdom that we need so bad. And also just the envisioning piece. I find we're all kind of like scrambling together the solutions, but there's no really like cohesive vision about where we're going. And so being able to imagine together and engage our imagination's hindsight, and then reverse engineer that to where we are in order to move towards it, is a really powerful thing. And it's also something that's really currently missing from the ecological movement, environmental movement. And so yeah, that's a big takeaway for me too, is just kind of like getting together and at least touching what it could be like, so that we all at least believe it, because it's hard to crack the thick shellac of the default world sometimes. And so it was, just being out here by the river and having our meals, and like, this is so far from a conference that, but here we are all learning, just as, like way more than if there was like a PowerPoint and like cups of tea. No. There was cups of tea. Yeah, I think a story that what's been great is the bump space. Not over-engineering the program so that there's lots recorded. And there was one conversation I had around the fire, was around the narratives that we communicate, quite complex or confronting issues. And this was around how we can like almost gamify or be more playful with some of the stories that we use. And I remembered 10 years ago I lived in Wellington, and they had this narrative around preparing for a civil emergency as, oh, are you ready for the zombie apocalypse? And it was way more effective than any formal work of like, hey, just so you know, if there's an earthquake, we're all screwed and everybody needs to get, this and that and that. But they gamified it and they made it a bit of a yarn, and it really engaged us as emotional creatures, as imaginative creatures, which is far more true of my human experience than what we're told of around, or what we're expected to be, which is rational, data-driven, like, if we just get enough science, it'll all sort of fix itself. It's like, no, actually, we really need for the shared cultural narratives to give us the opportunity to actually engage with a life-affirming or pathway to a life-sustaining society. And that is really where different ways of knowing come in really handy. And there's this piece around our Western worldview and scientific thinking, where it's implicit that this whole world is this kind of unfeeling sort of grow medium that we're all just kind of existing on, and we get to dig it up and sell it to each other. And it just doesn't actually like have a embedded value system that's functioning right now. And it doesn't take us too long to just sort of adjust the lens just a little bit towards some of the other cultures in the world, where the narrative is that this earth is our mother. And like, don't be stink to your mum, you know, or like don't sort of choke out your father with methane and CO2. Like it's actually not that difficult to kind of sense into what is a regenerative pathway or action for our head and our heart and our hands. It's actually to just fall into a rhythm with an inherent process of becoming and belonging here on earth. We'd love to hear some more reflections. What else have people gathered from their time at Future Whenua? That's right, we're all in our little silos with our algorithms kind of feeding us whatever enrages us the most. And it's just so heartwarming to come together and rub shoulders and actually meet who's in your district or who's passionate about the same topics and really just team up. And that's kind of what we would love for this session to just really galvanize as a major takeaway from Future Whenua, is to know that you're not alone. And you can reach out to the kaupapa, to each other, and we're all facing this uncertain future together. And it's, how can I possibly despair if you're here with me? It just gives me so much hope. So the invitation for you here and now is to step into this identity as a change maker. You already are, and we are making change together. And this has been Future Whenua 2023. So we'll hand it over to Zev. Let's hear it.
Yeah, just I don't have anything majorly profound or anything left to say. That was surmised so beautifully. Thank you, Samantha and Leo. I just want to just add my thanks specifically to a few people who are not here, the volunteers and the team at the house. Just been so rock solid. There's been like things just like crumbling around, like you know, COVID's at play in the wider community, and yeah, so that's affected some of the speakers who are going to show up. Our head chef, we were going to have live music last night. There's just been few things that have been falling, and it's just like all of a sudden Hamish steps up and like cooks all weekend, and you know, and this. So there's just been like people holding it up, and I like fully want to recognise that. Helena, you've been absolute like rock. Thank you so much for everything you've been doing and all the phone calls, and like we've struggled to you know, get like the major sponsors and the big corporates to come on board and support this kaupapa, but we have had people like Spore Shift donating us mushroom boxes and the honey and the few different things, and that's come at a lot of messaging from you and just like everything else you've had, so thank you. And yeah, just like to all the speakers, it was like a really beautiful flow, and everyone just like held their space and delivered such a like pure, heartfelt message. Really just like grateful for that. And then yeah, finally to all of you for being here. Part of the intention with Future Whenua is just like, yeah, like for me, like I've really loved getting into events and holding the burning horse and just what that's gathered, but I'm just obviously really passionate about permaculture and restoration and earth building. So to have this event where it sort of like brings those things together, it's just, it's sort of like we feel like we're just like waving a flag, and we're not doing it with any gusto of like, you must come, that's now, it's time. It's just like, we're just here and we're waving a flag and we're saying this is stuff that's really important to us, who wants to show up. And you guys have shown up, and you've been here for today, the whole weekend. You've all contributed in different ways, like energetically, physically, and intellectually. And yeah, so just like respect you all, and yeah, just summoning on that, those like mighty fine words that you just left us with, Samantha and Leo. This is a mere gesture of gratitude for those that are here right now. If you could maybe flick through and pick one that aligns with you and go through. It's a Future Whenua 23 token.
These are local math items dropped in some high winds, so it's fell through.
Yeah, it's a 500 plus year old tree. This, and so it was milled and will be used by Dan, the carpenter, that helped do the inside of the horse, and he was so grateful to send us a few branches to turn into these. So thank you all. Go well, live wonderful lives, and see you in 2025. Unless you want to come out to the Northland next year for 2024. If anyone's around next weekend and wanting to keep this fire burning, Harvest Festival down in Riverton is going to be an absolutely tremendous event with a perfectly aligned kaupapa. So we'll wrap this up. Good job, Dave. Final words in the form of a poem by Nora Bateson. It's called Ecology of Love. Ecology is a love story, a play scripted between the sunlight's tender dappling on the forest floor, the elegant drapery of the vines that climb a cliff face, the tickle of the squirrels and birds holding society in the treetops, and the sultry sway of the purple kelp that otters cannot resist, the touch of life on life, met in the tension between unshaking trust and heartbreaking vulnerability, is a kiss of light and love and heat, and earth that is fierce and sweet. It births and rages with the same passion. It births a wild rose, and in naming you, I grasp and find there are no completions, nothing in straight lines, only affection, reaching and reading the gestures that spread everywhere.